Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Shannon Sharpe had a high-profile falling out with his co-host Skip Bayless some months back. It was nasty, ugly, and it showed that these pretend white liberals who claim to be so understanding of black people, especially black athletes, they're nothing more than putting up a front. All the times that Skip Bayless pretended to be echoing the reasonable sentiments of Shannon Sharpe about race, it was all just a phony, hollow act. NFL player Damar Hamlin suffered a cardiac arrest on the field. He nearly died, and Shannon Sharpe was upset with Bayless's intentionally callous social media posts about this incident. Now, the very least that reprobate Bayless had to do was to say that he was sorry, he didn't mean it, he was an idiot and wouldn't do it again, but instead, he wanted to show everyone that it was no accident at all what he said. He meant every word of it, exactly as he said it. He doubled down, said he wasn't apologizing for anything, not even after he was confronted by Shannon Sharpe on it. Shannon didn't come to work the next day. As Sharpe explained it, he was in the frame of mind that if he had come to work that day, he most likely would have put his hands on Bayless. He's not alone. Go into the archives on this YouTube channel. Matt Barnes talked about how he had to stop players from laying hands on Bayless because of the reckless way he would run his mouth. From the day that Shannon Sharpe came on Undisputed, he was carrying Skip Bayless's raggedy behind. But like so many other people in the white media, Skip Bayless already knew that his job security wasn't based on performance. It was based on white privilege. Now, Shannon Sharpe has landed over at ESPN, allegedly because of Stephen Smith, who of course decided he was going to get some attention for himself by interviewing Shannon Sharpe about this whole incident. Now, Shannon said that he was hurt by Skip Bayless's words and actions and the just plain disrespect that he chose to show him on air. Shannon Sharpe, it seems like a lot of these Negroes who work for the white media, especially Negroes who come out of sports, they think that they can buy the gratitude of these white supremacists who they work for or work with. Shannon Sharpe thought that every day he came to work and did a good job and got along with Skip Bayless, that he was making daily deposits into some invisible bank account of goodwill. And what he found out was that these racists in the white media considered him bankrupt. They don't have any gratitude at all, or goodwill. All that work Shannon Sharpe did was repaid with scorn, insults, and ultimately driving him out. Now, I don't know anything about Club Shay Shay. I guess he does interviews there with celebrities and such. And it's good that he owns it. At least he wasn't a fool and let somebody have rights to it. He's built up some brand equity with it, so there's that. But Shannon Sharpe found out that his white employers over at FoxSports didn't see or care how much he was worth to their organization, not in the final analysis. No matter what anyone thinks, Skip Bayless is not interesting. He's just another white guy who wasn't able to play ball, so he disrespects those who can. Skip Bayless is old. He doesn't have the pulse of the audience. Shannon Sharpe clearly is the real draw. People watched Undisputed because Shannon was interesting. Skip was there to be the sit-in for the suburban dweebs who weren't even good enough to be the water boy. But it never sat well with Skip Bayless. He simply wanted Shannon Sharpe there so that he would have somebody to be his little buddy who he thought he could use as a sounding board and nod with him. He didn't expect that he was going to get outshined. But he did. Not that that was necessarily a hard thing to do. But what disgusts me but doesn't surprise me is that even after everybody saw what Shannon Sharpe had to go through on that show because of Skip Bayless's deplorable, unforgivable behavior, Bayless was still able to find a silly Negro willing to be on camera with him. No cure for stupid. And speaking of stupid, Stephen A. Smith did an interview with Shannon Sharpe about that. I guess he's trying to milk it for everything it's worth. Some people are saying that Stephen Smith was the one who got Shannon on with ESPN. Now, people are also saying that Smith knows how it feels to get dumped by a network, so he clearly had empathy for a fellow black man, and he wanted to make sure that he did Shannon a solid one. You gotta be pretty dense if you actually believe that. Family, has anyone forgotten what Stephen Smith said that he does every single day?
I got something very simple to tell you that I figured out that I think will work for anybody in the world of corporate America and beyond. I wake up every day with two missions in mind. How do I make my bosses more money? And how do I get some of it? Very simple. Why is that? Because if you wake up with that mindset, number one, the boss wants to hear what you have to say because they know that you're putting them first.
The only thing going on in that two-cycle weed whacker brain of his is how to make his white bosses at ESPN more money and how he can try to finesse himself some of it. He said it himself. Stephen Smith is a creature purely of self-interest. But some people have put the blinders on and don't want to see that. He didn't bring Shannon Sharpe to ESPN to do Shannon any favors. He did it as a way to curry favor with his white bosses by bringing them a solid earner. Someone who will help give the viewers something to watch on ESPN, because God knows Stephen Smith is boring as hell. And before it's all over, I bet we'll see Smith trying to finesse himself something out of Shannon Sharpe being at the network. Don't be at all surprised if Sharpe and Smith wind up having a big falling out of their own. Remember, Stephen Smith's had nothing but good things to say about Skip Bayless, even after the way he treated Shannon Sharpe. And like Bayless, Stephen Smith is a failed wannabe never-gonna-be athlete. Like Skip Bayless, Stephen Smith resents and dislikes the athletes around him, particularly the black ones, because they became what he desperately wished he could have been. And he knows that no matter how he tries to come off as being one of the jocks, they look at him as a failure and a washout. Stephen Smith has far more in common with Skip Bayless than not, including his insecurities. He fears Shannon Sharpe. Because whereas Stephen Smith is basically a loudmouth and the worst comedian on TV, Shannon Sharpe comes off as more thoughtful, and he has a lot better material. It shouldn't surprise anyone at all if things end between Shannon and Smith the same way they did between Shannon and Bayless. There's plenty of precedent for it. Recently, Terrell Owens did an interview responding to certain criticisms that he had gotten from Stephen Smith. Smith had been threatening to expose Terrell Owens. For what, I don't know. Apparently, Stephen's still salty from the time when Terrell Owens said that Max Kellerman was blacker than Stephen Smith. This was back during the Kaepernick fiasco, and clearly Stephen Smith's still butthurt about it, because when someone posted that video on Twitter, Terrell Owens retweeted it with the comment, "Facts." And that was what set Camel Face off. Stephen Smith went into not one but two Twitter tirades. In the first, Smith responded directly to Terrell Owens saying, "You know how I feel about your sorry A, and you know why." Smith then added, "Tell folks to ask ESPN what your desperate A tried to pull. Keep on talking. Eventually you'll expose yourself." Now he's going on a profanity-laced tirade, and even name drops ESPN. Weren't the white bosses at ESPN concerned about that, how it would reflect poorly on the company? Did they reprimand Smith for it? Of course not. Stephen Smith knows exactly what his job is over there at ESPN. Sure, trying to make some money for his white paymasters is part of it, but then again, any trained gerbil could be made to do that. The reason he's there is so they got a black face who will attack black athletes, and they can say, well, you can't say it's racist because we got this little Negro over here doing it for us. So Stephen Smith knows that he can, and he's encouraged to cuss, talk crazy about black folks. As long as he's doing it towards a black person, it's okay. But Stephen Smith wasn't done with that first bit of idiocy, because he had a second tweet where he added, "Or maybe I'll just dedicate the entire Stephen Smith podcast to all the things you tried to do behind the scenes to brothers over the years, while claiming someone is more of a brother than others." Now, that was actually an indirect swipe at Max Kellerman. I mean, the pure venom here. You can tell that what Terrell Owens said burned Stephen Smith to the core of his putrid little soul. Oh, he was just emotionally and psychologically scarred by it because somebody said openly live on air what he knows everybody already thinks about him. He didn't think anybody would ever say it to his face, but somebody did. And he ain't going to get over it. Now, apparently Stephen Smith made good on his threat, and he went on a nearly 30-minute diatribe about Terrell Owens on YouTube, claiming that Owens had attempted to sue him and that he's desperate for money. Well, Owens had a response to that.
Right. So I guess there was something going on. I guess we were talking about the Kaepernick situation, and somehow there was a text exchange between me and him.
Between you and Stephen A?
Me and Stephen A.
Okay.
And he, on air, he mentioned something about the text, which I didn't give him consent to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had
that's one rule. If somebody texts you or any type of conversation takes, you do not share that on social media or none of that, bro. You just, especially the person don't know.
Yeah,
right, exactly. Right.
So I didn't take the honest, I didn't go out of my way to go file a lawsuit. I had an attorney that reached out to me, like, yo, that's not right. It's copyright infringement, something along those lines.
Gotcha. Oh, so someone just reached out, an attorney came and found you about it and said, do you want to pursue action
this is
against?
what happens. Like, he can't do that. So it wasn't really him. It was I looked at ESPN.
Okay.
ESPN has dogged me over the years.
Now keep in mind, this is what Stephen Smith did to someone who came on his sports show. Before it's all over, I think Shannon Sharpe might find that he went from the frying pan onto the floor. And what Terrell Owens said about the text messages being made public is important because when Smith was interviewing Shannon Sharpe about being pushed out of Fox Sports, Smith referenced some texts that he and Shannon had exchanged. If I were Shannon Sharpe, I would hope that none of the text messages sent to Stephen Smith had anything that Smith might be able to use to attack or embarrass him later on, should the need arise. Because, as he's done with Terrell Owens, he's shown that if you get crossways with him, he'll do whatever he can to attack you. In the end, Terrell Owens called Stephen's bluff and told him that if he has any alleged paperwork that will expose him, then he's more than welcome to make it public. Owens reiterated what I and others have said for decades now, that this little worm Stephen Smith is the white media's hatchet man in sports, and that his job is to attack black athletes, and that's how low he has to stoop just to get a paycheck. So when you hear Stephen Smith talking about, I get up every morning trying to figure out how do I make my bosses more money, yeah, go ahead and appeal to all of those racist white sports fans and racist white sports writers out there, and that's how you get your bosses more money, or at the very least, that's how you get them to smile and pat you on the head. But make no mistake, Stephen Smith clearly feels very insecure about how a white co-host got more respect from a black athlete than Stephen Smith did. And it's behavior like this that caused it. So this is who people are saying helped Shannon Sharpe. The reality is Stephen Smith was only helping himself. And just like Smith's buddy Skip Bayless, who Smith still compliments to this day, when Smith sees Shannon getting too much shine, when he sees the bosses at ESPN giving Shannon too much attention, then Smith knows the one Negro at a time rule is going to kick in, and he'll be doing whatever he can to avoid that. And the same way he was trashing Max Kellerman, saying that Kellerman wasn't interesting, and that he didn't like Kellerman, and that he couldn't win with Kellerman, he will use different excuses, but ultimately make the same point if and when it's time to turn his blade on Shannon. I've criticized Shannon Sharpe for some of the things that he's chosen to say over the years, but believe it or not, I actually don't have that low an opinion of him. He certainly keeps poor company, like Stephen Smith, but Shannon's record of speaking up for black athletes has been far better than the deplorable suck-up Stephen. I don't take that away from him. Sharpe wants to have a second career in broadcasting, I get that. It can be a very lucrative gig to get into, and it's certainly better than golfing full-time or goofing off all day or whatever retired NFL millionaires do. Shannon's got the goods if he wants to make a go of being a broadcaster. He's stood up for himself when he's been disrespected. It's laudable that he does so, but it's also a shame the field that he's in. There's that old saying about keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. Problem is, when you work for the white media, you can forget all about friends. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Joel Hunton, Hildman Gallo, Samora Morris, Melvinia Miles, and Seven. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.